and welcome back to Ask GTN, where we're going to be talking about all things triathlon, not just specifically swim, bike or run. We're going to be tackling things like, how do you turn pro?
Can anybody turn pro, Mark?
Very good question, Fraser. Well, we're going to be tackling that, as well as loads of other questions we've been receiving over the last couple of months and year, actually. So let's tackle that first question from Elphick, and they've said, how did you turn into a pro? Do you think everyone can turn pro?
Well, I guess it was kind of, I would have said, a normal pathway here in the UK for me. Bit similar for you too, really. Came from swimming background as a kid, just trying to be a swimmer, wasn't really very good. I wasn't anyway. Mark was quite good. But, and then that just led me into sort of a traditional British triathlon pathway as such. Gave junior races a go, got a little bit better, managed to get on teams and things, went to under 23, got to major championships, European Worlds, just tried to do
and this is all draft league or
exactly,
ITU racing.
Yeah, with aspirational goals of maybe going to the Olympics. Wasn't going to happen. But yeah,
you did get close.
Well, that was the goal, you know, to try and get to the top level of racing. But yeah, that was how I started, and you were the same, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I came into it a lot later on, found myself on that pathway as well, going to Worlds, Europeans and all sorts, and trying to strive for the Olympics. Realised the Olympics wasn't going to happen. It was a very tough nation, Great Britain and Scotland, of course, for the Commonwealth Games. So then we both went down this long course pathway, which actually, to be honest, probably played into our strengths a bit more anyway. And then that was a chance for us to go pro in there. So yeah.
I mean, but then to dovetail into, can anybody turn pro? No. I mean, it's definitely not something that's, well, it's not an easy thing to do. And I guess the main point that I've seen a lot of very good age groupers try and grapple with is, how do they then switch over to being a pro? They might look at results and on a time-only basis think, oh, I'm competitive, I could give that a go. But then they actually come into racing and realise the nuances of professional racing. You do need to have a good swim, and that's why I guess Mark and I were lucky we came into it and that didn't faze us. And then there's other things that really aren't always that obvious when you're watching a race play out, is how the dynamics of a bike ride works.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the surging, and actually it's a case of you actually having to go with the race. You can't let that race go. So whereas in a age group amateur race, you'll often race your own race and you're just going for the times, you'll perfectly pace the ride. That doesn't happen in pro racing, and that can really affect your performance. And that is what a lot of age groupers that have then turned pro have really struggled with. And we've seen age groupers placing in the top 10 pros previously and then going to pro racing and finishing nowhere because it's been such a shock.
And I think that's where the experience that we have from that ITU short course days comes into its own, because the dynamics of short course racing is very fast. It's what we call stochastic, where there's lots of power surges and spikes and effort that you just learn to deal with as a youngster, and then you that dovetails into long course racing, not on the same extent, but you still cope with it. Whereas, as Mark said before, in age group racing, you almost can flatline and be very good at riding a very narrow power band, which is a great skill to have, but it's not always what happens in pro racing.
But it's not to say it is not possible, because we have also seen some very good age groupers step up to pro racing, and they are now the top pros out there. So
Kyle Buckingham, for one. Yeah.
Well, exactly. So it is more than doable, but it can be a shock to some people. Well, next question is from Roan Gabi, and they've said, do pro triathletes diet down and lose weight before an important competition? Very good question.
And yes, would be the broad answer to that. You would pick your target races in your season. You would know roughly what your weight is, or you should do. And as those races approach, whether they're early season, mid, late season, you're going to think to yourself, right, how do I lean down that little bit? That might be 1, 2, 3 kilos. It depends, but you'll have a number that you think is achievable, and then just figure out a way of just trimming that weight down in the weeks that lead into it, so that when you hit that race, you get to what we would call goal race weight.
Yeah. And this is so different from athlete to athlete. There's some athletes that can actually get away with being very lean, and I know from experience that I don't perform well under a certain weight, although I am fairly lean anyway. But if I go too much lower when I'm in race season, then I lose all my power on the bike and I cannot swim. So it does take a little bit of learning. And also I would say that for a lot of people out there, as you go into race season, you're doing more intense training, naturally that weight just drops anyway. So I wouldn't focus on it too much. It's important that we're actually quite careful in this area.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose the one other thing I would caveat that with is, we finish with a run, and by the very nature of running, it's a power to, well, it's power to weight in so much as you can run faster if you're a bit lighter, as Mark says, to a degree. And our next question comes in from Todd Holmes, who asks us, how do I balance training if I need a lot of work on one discipline without perhaps sacrificing the other two?
Yeah, well, first of all, it is not a bad thing at all to focus on one of the three disciplines. But what I would say is, let's take swimming, for example. If that's your weaker discipline, which probably is for a lot of people out there, is that you want to make sure that you're doing like a good focused block of that. So that might be somewhere between 6 to 8 weeks, maybe even shorter if you want to, but 6 to 8 weeks works.
It's a good period of time to really be able to start focusing on making some change.
Yeah, but the key is to make sure that you're maintaining the other two disciplines. So it'd be very easy to put all your effort into the swimming, which of course you should do. You want to make sure that you get good value from that, but you don't want to let the biking and running drop off. So I'd say just be really specific in the sessions that you're doing. You're going to be doing lower volume, but making sure that every minute on the bike, every minute running, it really counts.
And it's just being confident in that plan of attack that you're going to implement for this next 6 to 8 weeks, and also being mindful, because triathletes do tend to feel that more equals better. So all of a sudden you find yourself creeping other sessions back in on those other two disciplines, which really isn't going to help you try and focus on that swim block.
Yeah, and now is actually a really good time of year to do that in the off season, to really do those focus blocks and dedicate some time to swimming, biking or running. Next question from Daviders, and they've said, what are the best ways to prep for a hot weather event when it's still cold where I live?
Now, good point, especially for us coming from the UK, because usually, and I think we definitely, when we were racing, if we were going to have a big race somewhere, chances are it was probably going to be somewhere warmer than we were used to at home. We were in that fortunate position if we were able to, work in a training camp to go somewhere to prep for those races, but, totally understand that's not a luxury most people can afford. But fear not, there are definitely things and sort of tricks that you can employ at home to just adapt.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you could literally just put on extra clothes when you go for a bike ride or a run outside. It'll be uncomfortable, but it's actually a very good and easy method to go with.
Oh, you definitely get some adaptation from it.
Yeah, almost like boxing.
Yeah, Rocky. But you could also as well think about things like, I don't know, setting the turbo trainer up inside. Let's have the bathroom with the taps running. So if you're thinking about a humid race, maybe that would definitely, or even just a hot and humid race, without doubt, that's going to give you that ability to kind of sense what it might feel like.
Yeah, I mean, you could switch the fan off, though that is going to be pretty horrible, because it's nice to have the ventilation even with the hot environment. Another method that I haven't actually really properly tried before in my training is to do a hard session, then maybe if you're doing that at a gym, you're on a treadmill or on a bike, then jump straight in the sauna.
Yeah, and I know quite a lot of athletes who do definitely do this. So if you've got one at your pool or your gym, definitely worth thinking about.
Yeah, fantastic. Good question. Next one from Bartscombe, and they've said, most effective brick workouts, question mark.
The old jelly legs.
Don't we love them?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that when we come into triathlon, we have to figure out a way to deal with, because running off a bike, totally different, as I'm sure you've experienced or will experience from running standalone in an event, right?
Yeah. Well, the term brick, just to sort of backtrack here, it was developed by Dr. Matt Brick, or so we understand anyway.
We hope it was, because it's a good sort of background, isn't it?
Yeah, he developed this sort of run to bike or bike to run.
He was a duathlete, I think.
He was a duathlete, yeah, that's what we understand anyway. And it seemed to be really quite successful. And it's basically trying to train us to adapt to this sensation of running off the bike with the jelly legs.
So, certain types of sessions you could think about implementing into your training. One that I always like to do as a kind of staple throughout my racing, whether that was when I was younger doing short course racing or then as I gravitated up to longer, was to take my longer bike ride of a week, which let's say is on a Saturday, and it might be sort of 3 hours, well, it would be 3 hours plus, and then just simply say, right, I'm going to have my run gear set out wherever I'm going to be finishing the bikes. I can try and get into that stuff pretty quickly. You don't have to make it as fast as a transition, but equally you don't want it to be so long that it kind of negates the purpose of doing that run off the bike. And then just simply adding in initially a short run off the bike. Now that might even just be 10 or 15 minutes initially, and I would say, right, I'm going to run out nice and easy for half that time, turn and just try and run home a little bit quicker, and then just gradually build that over time. And then if you wanted to think about something a little bit more specific or short course orientated, there's other types of sessions that you could do as well.
Yeah, so you could do very short, intense bike rides, so you're going to get a lot of fatigue in a short period of time, and then same thing, try and run off. Or you could do multiple bike, run, as some pros we've seen doing.
Which is a lot of fun in a sort of painful way.
Yeah, or we do have a session that you could see just here.
Now this is focused more on those shorter distance triathlons, your sprint and Olympic distance triathlons. In fact, this is the session that I'm doing today. And it's got some relatively short, high intensity efforts with, again, some relatively short recoveries between them. But if you're doing some slightly longer events like a half Ironman or an Ironman, then we have this session here that has some relatively long sustained efforts. We've got 2 lots of 20 minutes on the bike and 2 lots of 10 minutes on the run. And that'll really help you to dial into your pace and also use your aero bars for some long periods of time on the bike. Okay, but now let's really mix things up a bit now, because there's no harm in going from one discipline to the next, over and over and over, sort of creating a monster brick session like this one. Now this will be a really high intensity, it's quite short reps from one to the next, but the focus is really on going from those transitions from one discipline to the next, practicing that process and that feeling. And of course, you can increase the durations depending on the distance that you're focusing on. It really can be tailored any way you like.
And now a question from Paul Dishler, and he asks us, a bigger guy, but we'd like to trim down to a decent race weight or size, and have you got any suggestions?
Yeah, well actually this is a sort of a common thought and process really, that by training for long distance events like triathlon or endurance events for that matter, it's like we can adopt this seafood diet where we literally eat any food in our path. But that's not really the case, is it?
That we can see, yeah. I mean, it really leads quickly to eating everything in the fridge syndrome, and that's not a good way to go. But in all seriousness, I hadn't really contemplated the thought process of people doing lots more training and therefore eating lots more, but actually rather than losing weight, they're actually putting it on. And that's obviously not what we're hoping to do at all.
No, not at all. And actually I think what happens is people think that by doing all this training, we're going to negate a bad diet and we're going to outweigh any food, any bad food, a pack of Haribo, whatever it is. But it doesn't work like that.
No, and actually a good example, I remember a girl in Scotland, Katrina Morrison, who I used to train with a lot. When she was racing, she decided to take, I think it was Fridays, and that would be her treat day. And they in the house would have whatever it was, their beer, their pizza, curry, whatever they liked, her and her husband, on that day. And that was the day that they would have it. And it worked really well for them. I wouldn't have been able to stick to that, to be honest. But I guess it's finding something that still allows you to have that reward, as we might call it, if you want to have it, of course. And that allows you to kind of keep both sides of the fence happy, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess probably what you're striving for is consistent meals. So you're not looking for a massive breakfast, massive lunch, massive dinner. It's actually spreading those meals a little bit more over the day, keeping the breakfast normal, lunch normal, dinner normal, but actually fueling well before a session, after a session. So you're never craving food too much and sort of going into that debt that's going to make you really, really want to sort of overeat.
Yeah, so if you are obviously upping your training and getting more consistent with the routine, there is more calories being burned, therefore you do need to eat a little bit more, but do try and keep that regular pattern of meal times the same and get that extra calorie intake before and after training in a sort of more controlled manner?
It's a very good question and quite a complicated one, so
yeah.
I think there's probably a video in that at some point, so yeah, stay tuned for that. Abel Burma asked, can you explain tapering? And yes, we can. We could talk about this forever, couldn't we?
Yeah, I mean, you know, tapering in its simplest form is reducing our training off from a high point a few weeks, you know, predetermined amount of time before our goal race, and then just whittling that down until you get to race day feeling ideally fresh and absolutely ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different methods to doing this as well, actually. I mean, we used to adopt a process of kind of tapering a few weeks in advance and then increasing the training again back into the race, because what happens is when you're coming off a big training block, you're often feeling so fatigued that your body almost goes, oh, thank goodness, and you potentially get ill. Your body sort of lets its guard down, and that's, you know, by doing it well enough in advance and getting rid of those horrible feelings that you often get when you first start a taper. It allows you to get that all out of your system, crack back on with some good training to get the body pumping, feeling good, then just ease back down again into the race. So.
Often called a reverse taper, actually.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
you would rather than literally whittling things right down to a point. If you imagine a graph where just dropping down, then obviously, as Mark's saying, there's that little bit of a kick, you know, happening right before, which keeps the body not guessing, but just remembering what's going to come on race day, which is obviously a hard effort.
Yeah, but one thing we should really point out, there is this misconception with tapering that you literally come off the gas and you got 3 weeks of just chilling out, putting your feet up. That doesn't happen. Actually, you still do need to be working quite hard, but it's just reducing that overall stress and volume to make sure that you arrive in the best shape possible.
But as you say, reducing the volume, but you do need to keep the intensity in there.
Yes.
Not as much, but there has to be some, again, so the body doesn't forget what's going to happen.
Thanks so much for sending in all your questions. We've loved going through them today, and please do keep sending them in for future Ask GTNs. Now, if you like this video, hit that thumbs up button, and if you'd like to see more videos from GTN, you can subscribe to the channel by just clicking on the globe. And if you'd like to see more of that brick session video, it's our brick session 101, just click up there.
And if you want to see our other Ask GTN based on swimming, you can get that here.